best conference in the nation, the SEC, is the conference that I'm going to be talking about today. Just doing a little preview on the SEC. We'll start off with the bad before we do the good. Vanderbilt, in the SEC media days, I really feel like Derek Mason really tried to sell that Vanderbilt, was going to be one of them dogs this year, one of them fighters, one of them SEC teams that you don't know if they're going to be 3-9, don't know if they're going to be 6-6, don't know if they're going to be 9-3 type act, and I'm not buying it. I got them going 3-9 this year. That's my projection. Looking at their schedule, got them going 3-9. Losing Zach Cunningham, 125 tackles, 16.5 tackles for a loss, is going to be vital on defense. Losing him is going to be vital. Owen Burks, Ryan White, Ladarius Wiley, three of their top leading tacklers that'll be back. And these are some secondary guys. Arnold Tarpley and Trey Herndon are some other guys that were supposed to be some top talent for them in the secondary too. And they got into a little bit of an altercation about a month or so ago, and we'll see how they are at the start of the season. On the line, senior Nafel Laleo, he had 2.5 sacks. That's the most leading guy on their defense line coming back. For the Commodores, though, it's more about the offense. To see what they'll do this year. Ralph Webb is their stud, is the star on the team. I'd say on the offensive side of the ball, returning offensive line, they're returning 3 guys on the offensive line, which is not bad. And I like Kyle Sherman to have a better season than he did last year. I think, if he can cut down on the interceptions, raise the touchdowns a little bit, I think he'll definitely throw for more yards this year, just being a little bit older. Good news, they are returning, they're not all their receivers that they had last year. Not that any of their receivers last year really did a whole lot, but they're returning most of those guys, C.J. Duncan, Trent Sherfield, Clay Scott. This team did make it to a bowl game last year after going 6-6. They did get demolished by NC State, and I don't know. I don't think they're going to be that great this year. I got them going 3-9, and now, like I've said though, SEC is the toughest conference. You're playing tough opponents all year long. 6-6 SEC team is a lot better than a 6-6 SEC team is probably the same as a 9-3 Big Ten team. Just because the Big Ten plays a lot of garbage, a lot of teams that you should beat during the year, a lot of teams that you should beat in your conference. Now Missouri is more of a surprise this year for me. I think that they're actually going to be better than last year. I think, it's going to be Barry Odom's second year. I don't think anything crazy this year. I think next year, if they can get Locke to come back next year, I think it is a real important year for them. They are returning 10 starters on offense. So I think this will be an improvement. I see them going 6-6 this year. Drew Lock, I like Drew Lock. He did throw for 34K yards last year. Not 34K. He didn't throw for 34K. He threw for 3,399 yards. And then 23 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Not terrible on a 4-8, not great team. He's got some real talent at the right wide receiver position that I would watch out for. Jamon Moore, All-American type talent. Jonathan Johnson. He was a freshman last year. He's a sophomore this year. Watch out for him. And Demetrius Mason, another freshman last year. He's a sophomore this year. Those are some guys to watch. Wide receiver wise, running back wise, they got a pretty good little tandem. Damara Cockrell and Ish Whitner, 2 guys that played a lot last year, combined for 16 touchdowns, about 1,800 yards last year. They are returning their entire Offensive line, which I think is very important. That's something you don't really see a whole lot. You might see a team return four. You might see a team return three offensive linemen, but it's rare to see them return five offensive linemen. This offense is really, they're going to have to really show out this year. This team has an opportunity to do better than expected. It's a team that when it first came into the SEC from the Big 12, it went to two straight SEC championship games. I'm not expecting them to do that this year, but we'll see. If they could potentially, well, no, they've got a tough schedule playing in the SEC. So 6-6 is good. They'll be good. They're a good team, but I don't. They won't be one of the top dogs. Defensively, Terry Buckner, guy that got a couple years ago, he's a junior now. We'll see what he can do this year. Eric Bezel, a good senior middle linebacker. Marcel Frazier had 7.5 sacks last year. He's a senior this year, defensive end. In the secondary, Cam Hilton and Anthony Sherrills hold it down. They're two of the top three tacklers coming back. And then David Wilson is a guy. Let's see where he's at. He's their leading tackler coming back. Thomas Wilson is actually his name, sorry. So we'll see how this team does this year. Kentucky is a team I like. I don't like the fact that they're trying to change their quarterback position, or that's Drew Barker was kind of supposed to be the guy, and Steven Johnson came in last year and he played really good. Now I don't know who's going to be the starter. I'm thinking Steven Johnson should be. He's a good runner too, and they got a really good running back in Benny Snell. Benny Snell had a really good year last year. He honestly had just as good of a year as Stanley Boom Williams. And wide receiver wise, they're losing Jeff Badgett to Oklahoma. He transferred over there. Garrett Johnson is a senior this year. He had 39 catches, 585 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. Not a lot of experience other than that. CJ Conrad, their tight end, had 4 touchdowns, 19 catches, 262 yards last year. So their offense is kind of, position player-wise, you got a couple question marks in a couple of different places. But offensive line-wise, they're returning 4 or 5. I like that. They've got a good kicker. He was 16 of 19 last year. He had a long of 51. And then defensively, they're returning their top 4 tacklers back on defense. Jordan Jones, SEC, All-American, All-SEC type talent. Mike Edwards, a strong safety. He's a senior this year. He had 3 picks, 100 tackles last year. Jordan Jones had 109 tackles, 11.5 for a loss, 4 sacks. And then some other guys to watch: Courtney Love, the middle linebacker, Denzel Ware, another linebacker. Some good guys to watch. Josh Allen, another linebacker. He had 7 sacks last year. Ware had 5.5. And then in the secondary, with watching Mike Edwards, watch Derek Beatty. He's another. He's a good cornerback. I project them going 6-6, kind of similar to the season that Missouri's going to have. They're going to have some tough games. They're going to lose, and they're going to have. They might upset a team or two, but it'll be a pretty tough. It'll be more of a similar. Not similar because usually Kentucky's kind of like the basketball school of SEC where they suck at football and they're finally becoming a little bit better. So that's nice to see. First bowl game last year since 2010. But this is a better, this is kind of like more achieving 6-6, to do that 2 seasons in a row to get to another bowl game, I think would be, good for the Wildcats. Not that that's, great in college football terms, but for Kentucky, which is a basketball school, they're on their way up in a sense. South Carolina, I don't think South Carolina will be awesome. They returning 4 of the 5 offensive linemen. I like that. Hayden Hurst, a good receiver, had 48 catches, 616 yards last year. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver, had 59 catches, 783 yards and a touchdown last year. Brian Edwards, 44 catches, 590 yards and 4 touchdowns. Wide receiver wise, they're returning some good returners. Rico Dow, AJ Turner are both back. Sophomore Tyson Williams. They got kind of a little bit of a tandem there looking at running back with Turner and Dow. They combined for 1,200 yards and or about 1,300 yards. But Rico had 781 of them and 6 of the 9 touchdowns between them. So Dow's more of probably the guy at the position, but watch out for AJ Turner and Tyson Williams to get some time. And Dow's just a sophomore. Jake Bentley, sophomore quarterback, he got the nod. There was a couple of different guys that got some playing time last year, but eventually Bentley became the guy. I look for him to have improved stats. He had 1,500 yards and 9 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. If he can continue to keep his interceptions down, and I think that would be good for him. Defensively, this isn't the defense that they've had in the past. The Gamecocks that have always been able to fall back on. But DJ Smith, safety, had 80 tackles last year. Brian Allen Williams, 75 tackles last year. He's returning as a middle linebacker for them. I think are two good players. Sky Moore, he didn't get to play last year. I think due to injury, but he's a real good player that they'll have this year. And then Taylor Stallworth, another good player on their defense at their defensive tackle. And then watch out for Jamarcus King and Chris Lamons in the secondary. Also, they had 3 interceptions each last year. Both are cornerbacks for this team. So like always in the SEC, you're like, dang, how's this team? How are you projecting this team to be 5-7? This sounds like a pretty talented team, and they should be on the up and up, or better than they were last year. And I don't know. I just kind of see them being about the same as they were last year. And it's just the conference they play in. Their teams are making strides, but they're not making enough strides to get with the top teams. And that's just the SEC for you. Tennessee, is last year was supposed to be their year. 9-4 for the last 2 seasons. So they've gotten lots of good recruits the last couple of years. When you look at their team, they've got a lot of talent. I have them going 7-5 this year, and that's not bad in the SEC. When you talk about when you play a tough, a pretty good non-conference team, and then you play your conference schedule. I think 7-5 is not bad SEC wise. And this team could do better than that. I just think with their quarterback situation, they don't really know who their quarterback necessarily will be. Quentin Dormady, kind of slated as the guy. He's projected to win the job. But Jarrett Gualatano and Will McBride, 2 other guys that are kind of competing for that spot too. John Kelly, running back, he got some time to play last year. With the transfers of Hearns and Kamara kind of coming out, his coming out party last year. Juwan Jennings is a top wide receiver, I would say, in the SEC to watch out for this year. Tyler Boyd, Josh Smith, some wide receivers, that might be able to make a bit of an impact for them this year. Ethan Wolf, senior this year, good tight end. Offensive line wise, they're returning 4 of the guys. And their kicker was 11 for 16 last year. He had an all right year. They have a good punter too, Trevor Daniel. And then defensively, Todd Kelly, Micah Abernathy, 2 guys in the secondary that had 70 tackles both last year. And they'll be back. Rashad Golden, Colton Jumper, some of their linebackers that were pretty good. I think Darren Kirkland will have a good year. Jonathan Kanogba is a junior. He's one of the number one JUCOs, defensive end. And he's coming over to Tennessee this year. And then Kendall Vickers, he's a senior. Khalil McKenzie, another guy to watch. This team's got a lot of talent everywhere. Evan Berry's a good kick returner. They got a lot of talent everywhere. It's just, will they fit it all together? And, they've had a lot of talent in the past and they hadn't got it together. And I don't look at this year as another year where they can. Facing Florida and Georgia so early in the year, I think is what is tough for them. And for the next team, Georgia's going to have a really good year. To me, they have, obviously Alabama always has one of the top defenses, but Georgia has one of the top defenses in the nation in the sense of a lot of returning guys. They have 10 returning guys on defense. Raquan Smith, all SEC player, 95 tackles last year. Natrez Patrick, 59 tackles last year. Trenton Thomas, 56 tackles, 5 sacks. Aaron Davis, 54 tackles. They return a lot of guys. Malcolm Parrish on the defense. Lorenzo Carter, 44 tackles, 5 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. Davin Bellamy had 17 quarterback hits, 5 sacks, 51 tackles. Dominic Sanders, he had 3 picks last year. DeAndre Baker, 2 picks last year. This is just an experienced defense, and I think, they will be a top team this year. I have them going 10-2 on the year, losing to Florida at the neutral site game in Jacksonville, and then losing at Auburn a couple weeks after that. But other than that, I see them handling week 2. Early in the season, I think talent kind of trumps, teamwork. I think later in the year, chemistry starts to develop between teams and teams get hot. And sometimes teams that don't have as much talent start to, succeed later in the year and they get on these runs, kind of like Penn State last year. But there's teams that just have so much talent at the first of the year that regardless of how bad they play, they still have a chance in most of the games. And Georgia's one of those, and they play at Notre Dame week 2. I think, Notre Dame is one of those teams I think is good, and I think as the year progresses, they will figure it out. But Georgia is a team that I feel like is going to start really hot, and then when teams start to catch up chemistry-wise, I think that's when they will kind of fall out of place a bit. Offense, I talked about their defense. Offensively, Nick Chubb, one of the best, running backs in the nation. Jacob Eason honestly really struggled last season as a freshman. I knew it would happen. But, the way that I thought of it was, he's going to struggle this year, but in the future, it's just going to make him succeed that much more. He's a good quarterback. He's got a good arm. He realizes the mistakes that he made during the year. If this is a guy that stays for a while, he can break some of the records that were left by Murray and David Green, Aaron Murray and David Green. Terry Goodwin, a good wide receiver that they have. They will have to replace Isaac McKenzie. Isaac McKenzie had 7 touchdowns, 44 catches, 633 yards. He was huge for the team. Him and Eason had real good chemistry, so we'll see which guy he can connect with. Isaac Nada, he's a sophomore this year, good tight end. And then Ryan Ridley and Michael Chichibu are some other wide receivers to watch. They only have 2 offensive linemen returning, a good kicker, Ricardo Blankenship, though. So we'll see about the offensive line. We'll see how Nick Chubb does. Don't forget about Sonny Mitchell, also another good running back. I just think, Chubb's more the guy for Georgia. He fits the offense more, and that's kind of how it's always been for both of them. And then Florida, I have Florida winning the SEC East, going 9-3. I think what kind of put it over the top for me is Malik Zaire transferring there. I think he'll be the starting quarterback. when the season starts. I look at this team. This is one of the teams I think will struggle at the first of the year. Now they do, and this is, I mean, the reason that they're going to struggle at the first of the year is just because the new quarterback and playing Michigan your first game, Tennessee your third game, and then at Kentucky. I think those are some games that really aren't cakewalks where you can kind of get your team together, kind of get going, and you can kind of find yourself in a hole after those 4 games, if you don't take at Kentucky seriously. And then, you have Vanderbilt and then LSU. I mean, it's tough every week in the SEC. But I have them, losing to Michigan and Arlington and then really getting it together, really honing in, beating the cupcake team, Northern Colorado, and then, getting real confidence by beating Tennessee at home, going into Kentucky, beating Vanderbilt, and then I have them losing to LSU at home. Kind of reality check of where we are, and then I see them winning for most of the season until they're going to win against Georgia. I see them kind of winning the rest of the year and then losing to Florida State. I got them going 9-3, representing the SEC East in the SEC championship game. Jordan Scarlett, LaMichael Piron, Mark Thomas. All good running backs. You'll see all 3 of them this year. Scarlett's kind of the main dude, though. Brandon Powell, he had 45 catches, 387 yards, 2 touchdowns. Antonio Callaway, 54 catches, 721 yards, 3 touchdowns. One of the top NFL prospects is Callaway. And then DeAndre Goolsby is another good talent. He's a tight end. They're returning their top 6 receivers in a sense of they're not losing anybody receiver wise. They'll have all their skill position wise on offense. They're returning a lot of their guys. Offensive line, they're returning 3 out of the 5, which is good. 2 of the guys on the offensive line are 2 of the top offensive linemen in the country, Jawan Taylor and Martez Ivy. And they always the thing about Florida, Miami, Florida State, they have the best talent. And a lot of times that talent is on the defensive side of the ball. Jabari Zaninga, CC Jefferson, 2 of the good guys on their defensive line. They have Jordan Sherritt had 38 tackles last year, and then Duke. Their secondary is really good. Duke Dawson, Chauncey Gardner, a sophomore, and then Nick Washington. Marcel Harris is their top returning tackle. He's in the secondary, 73 tackles, 2 interceptions last year. David Reese, sophomore linebacker, 49 tackles last year. I think this team goes 9-3, beats Georgia. I mean, the decisive game is October 28th, Georgia, Florida. Whoever wins that game is kind of is going to be the winner. We got Mississippi State. Mississippi State is I project them to get last in the West. I got them going 4-8. Their best player is Nick Fitzgerald. He's great throwing the ball. He's great running the ball. He had 1,400 yards last year running the ball, 2,400 yards, 21 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He had a total of 37 touchdowns last year altogether. Very good year, overshadowed by other good players like I can think of like Lamar Jackson, but a very good year for Nick Fitzgerald. Second team All SEC I saw today, so they look at him having a very good year, being a good factor for them. But it's just kind of and I mean he's got some other good people around him. Arius Williams, a good running back, had 731 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. Donald Gray, 41 catches, 709 yards, 5 touchdowns. And he was behind Fred Ross last year, so he was overshadowed by him. So he's the top guy coming back. Malik Deer is another wide receiver to watch this year. Only returning 2 starters on offensive line, which is tough. Don't like that. And then defensively, Leo Lewis is their best player, 79 tackles last year. T.J. Gray, Brandon Bryant, some other good players. And then McLaurin, Mark McLaurin had 2 interceptions last year, 51 tackles. He's a free safety. Brandon Bryant's the strong safety, had 62 tackles last year. TJ Gray's another linebacker. And I don't really see them making a lot of noise. Typical Mississippi State year. I don't think anything crazy. Maybe a little bit better than 4-8, but I don't know. Mississippi Rebels, Ole Miss. I like their quarterback Shea Patterson. He's only a sophomore though. It'll take a little bit of time for him to develop. I think this is a good year for him to develop. I think biggest thing, and I think this has been echoed throughout, is can Hugh Freeze get these guys to play, knowing that there's no postseason. There's no way that they're going to be playing in a bowl game, or no way. I know a lot of these guys, they got a lot of prospects. There's a lot of guys playing for their, lives on an NFL team. And when I think about guys like that, I think about Marquise Haynes and DeMarquise Gates as 2 guys as NFL talent. Some other good guys on this defense. Zedrick Woods, who had 63 tackles last year. DeMarquise Gates had 74 tackles and 4 sacks. Marquise Haynes had 53 tackles and 7 sacks. Woods also had 3 picks. And then some other guys, A.J. Moore and Miles Hartsfield, both had 42 tackles last year. Benito Jones on the he's a nose tackle. Breland Spears another nose tackle. Some good talent there. This is a very talented team. 6-6 in the SEC is not bad. But yeah, Shea Patterson's still young. Jordan Wilkins didn't really get a whole lot of playing time last year. He's a senior this year, though. Van Jefferson's their best returning wide receiver. DJ Metcalf and A.J. Brown are some wide receivers to watch out for. Octavius Cooley, another tight end, you might watch out for it to be good. And offensive line-wise, they're returning 4 of the 5 starters, so I see their running game not being terrible. Also, kicking-wise, Gary Wunderlich has returned. He was 22 for 23 last year, and he's pretty solid. 49 was his long. I see him being an NFL prospect. Okay, so Arkansas, I got Arkansas going 7-5. Surprisingly, I got them winning. Week 2 against TCU. I think it's a big game for both teams. It's at Arkansas, so I think that is good for Arkansas. And then they have their tough game with A&M after a bye week this year. We'll see what happens with A&M this year. They've lost to A&M for sure 5 years straight, I know of, and it's just been tough for them. And they go into Arlington every year and they play this team well, but they lose it every year. So that's a big game for them, this year, which will it's kind of like the stepping stone to getting to a showdown with Alabama, with Auburn, with an undefeated record. But they're returning Austin Allen, a good quarterback. He had 3,430 yards, 25 touchdowns, 15 interceptions last year. Pretty good player. He'll be a prospect in NFL. Jared Cornelius is their main returning wide receiver. 32 catches, 515 yards, 4 touchdowns. He'll be the main guy. JUCO that's coming over, Brandon Martin. Watch out for him. He could be good. Colin Jackson, a freshman wide receiver. We'll see if he gets some time this year. Dwayne Whaley is the running back slated to get most of the carries, 634 yards last year, 3 touchdowns, so he's got some experience from last year. Real good offensive line here. Frank Ragnow, one of the best centers in the country. Johnny Gibson and Brian Wallace, some other guys on the offensive line. Defensively, they've got a really good, really experienced secondary. Henry Tolliver, Josh Lytle is their leading tackle, 63 tackles, 2 interceptions last year. Ryan Pulley had 13 passes blocked last year. He's a cornerback. Like I said, Henry Tolliver, They both had 46 tackles each last year. Dre Greenlaw, a good linebacker returning. Dwayne Eugene, another good linebacker returning. And then guy on the defensive line that's supposed to be real good this year is McTelvin Agam. We'll see what he can do on the line for them. Hopefully, make an impact. But I got them going 7-5. Basically, a typical Arkansas year. Another bowl game. A&M I got going 7-5. I have them winning the game against Arkansas, and then losing the typical games that they lose. I got them losing at UCLA this year. They beat UCLA in the first game last year. I see them losing to them this year. Defensively, got some good players on defense. Their secondary is really good. Armani Watts, top. I feel like one of the top draft picks in the country. Nick Harvey, Priest Willis, and then linebacker-wise, Donovan Wilson, who had 59 tackles last year. Artaro Alka, who led the team. He didn't lead the team, but he's the top returning leading tackler with 74 and two sacks. Nick Harvey had 66 tackles last year. Armani Watts had 56 tackles and 2 interceptions. Zay Coven Henderson on the defensive line, watch him. Darlin Mack, another guy on the defensive line to watch. Offensive line returning 3 guys. Got a pretty good kicker. He's all right. Daniel LaCamara, 17 for 24 last year. 49 was his long. Christian Kirk, probably he's rated as one of the top wide receivers out of the SEC. He's not my number one guy on like NFL boards, but he's a top guy, top 5 guy. Jamon Osborne, he's a freshman. We'll see what he can do. Running back wise, Trayvon Williams and Keith Ford, they're in good hands. 2 good running backs. We'll see what they can do this year. Their main issue on offense is to see who's going to be the starting quarterback. I'm sure that the thing that's tough about I think about some teams that like have like a real shot of like getting time to like decide, okay, is this guy going to be our guy or is this guy going to be our guy? You get to play some soft talent. But what's tough for these SEC teams is they're playing really tough teams those first couple of weeks, so they got to really decide who's going to be the guy quick and and got to be okay with the guy that they choose. They're more veteran guy that's actually had some experience here at A&M is Jake Hubnick. And then Kelly Mund is a guy that is slated as one of the guys too. And then Nick Starkel is another guy. So we'll see which guy gets the starting position. I'm sure it'll change throughout the year with one of them, playing bad or whatever. I've got LSU as well. No, I don't have. I mean, LSU's the next team that I'm looking at, but I'm not. Auburn is the next team that I'm talking about. Auburn, I got them going 10-2, and I actually have them beating Alabama this year. I have them losing to Arkansas not losing to Arkansas. I have them losing to LSU, and I have them losing at Clemson early in the year. I like this team a lot. This is a team that I think will figure it out as the year goes on. I have them slated at 10-2 at the end of the year. Jared Stidham, the guy I like, he fits the offense perfectly for Auburn. I think, that is what, I think, him figuring out the offense, Cameron Petway and then Kerryon Johnson, 2 really good running backs that they have. They're returning 3 offensive linemen, Chandler Cox, tight end they're returning. They don't really throw the ball a whole lot. We'll see if they throw the ball a little bit more this year. We don't really know which receiver will emerge. Darius Slayton was their top receiver last year. Eli Stone, Craig Myers are some guys that are slated to get most of the receiving stuff. But this is one of those teams that it's more about the defense. Dontavius Russell is supposed to have a good year. Marlon Davidson, 2 defensive linemen that's supposed to be good. Linebacker-wise, they've got Trey Williams, who had 67 tackles last year. Deshaun Davis, 63 tackles last year. And Daryl Williams, who had 52 tackles. So they're pretty good at the linebacker position. And cornerbacks and safeties, they're always real talented here. Carlton Davis, one of their top guys, he's back. He had 10 passes blocked last year. Trey Matthews is their top tackler returning, 76 tackles and an interception last year. And then Steven Roberts, their other safety, had 57 tackles and 2 picks last year. I really like Auburn this year. To bounce back, get back there. They've got a real shot at an SEC title. But obviously, I don't think they'll win. LSU, I've got LSU to have a very good year. I really like Darius Geis. 3 offensive linemen are back. DJ Chark is a good wide receiver. Danny Etling, I'm not just real high on him or anything, but he had an all right year. He just kind of had to play don't fuck up role last year for LSU, and he did a good job of that. 11 touchdowns, 5 picks, 2,100 yards last year. I don't know. I mean, I'm really high on Geist. I think they're going to run the ball a lot. And there's not going to be a whole lot of pressure on Etling. I think the defense is going to be good, but I think it's going to be the same old story every year. You can't get past Alabama, so it doesn't matter what your record is. This could potentially be one of the first years where we see 2 SEC teams in the playoff, though, with Auburn going 10. If Auburn goes 10-2, or if they go 11-1, or if LSU goes 11-1, I'm projecting LSU to go 11-1. And obviously one of these teams aren't going to get to play in the championship game. So that's where that ends. Defensively, though, this is where this team is really the key. Arden Key came down with the injury the other day. We'll see. I think he'll be ready for the regular season, though. He had 12 sacks last year, 56 tackles. Huge. He's a huge player, huge talent. Donnie Edwards, another good linebacker. Donnie Alexander, 45 tackles last year. Secondary, the guys that hold it down: Kevin Tolliver, John Battle, Dante Jackson. Jackson had 2 picks last year, 8 passes blocked. Ed Paris is a senior this year. We'll see how he does. Devin White, a sophomore linebacker. I'm eager to see what he does. Greg Gilmore, a senior nose tackle. We'll see what he can do this year. I like LSU. I think, like I said, they'll go 11-1. Big games for them at Florida, and then the Auburn game at home, at Mississippi, at Alabama, which I think it's after a bye week, but I still think they'll lose. And then Arkansas, at Tennessee, at A&M at home. It's a tough season. I think they'll do all right though. Alabama, obviously to me, best team in the nation as far as talent. Best coach in the nation with Nick Saban. Main thing with them, their defense is just awesome. I feel as if they are missing a lot of guys, but they always just fill the spots. Deron Payne, Deshaun Hand at defensive line, two real good guys. 2 sacks for Hand last year, 21 tackles, and Payne only had 1.5 sacks, 36 tackles. Linebackers, Sean Dion Hamilton, supposed to be a 464 tackles last year, 2 sacks, 2 picks. Minka Fitzpatrick, Ronnie Harris, Anthony Averett, and Tony Brown in the secondary are what hold it down. Those guys are all top NFL talent. Harris had 86 tackles last year, 2 picks. Fitzpatrick had 6 picks, 66 tackles. Huge year for both those dudes. Anthony Averett had 48 tackles and 8 passes blocked. Really excited to see what happens with this team. Some sophomores: Terrell Hall, he'll probably be a good player. Rashad Evans, another two good linebackers. I see. Got a real good punter, J.K. Scott. He's a senior this year. And then offensively, for getting to return Jalen Hurts, I think he's going to have a monster year. I feel like last year was a real filling out process for him. And then, Bo Scarborough. To me, Bo Scarborough is, a force to be reckoned with. I don't look at him as much as a Heisman candidate just because of all the other talent that's going to be around him, and I think there's going to be like always a sharing of wealth at between the yardage and stuff like that. He did have a thousand yards, or he had 800 yards rushing last year, 11 touchdowns. But Hearns is going to run the ball. He had 1,100 yards last year. Damian Harris is back, and he rushed for 1,000 yards last year, and 2 touchdowns. Scarborough's more the guy around the goal lines, though. Calvin Ridley, real good wide receiver. He had 72 catches, 769 yards, 7 touchdowns. I look for him to have a huge year. Robert Foster, another wide receiver, I look for him to have a really good year. And then, they got their young guys, Jeffrey Juidi, a freshman. Watch for him. They're returning 3 offensive linemen. The other guys that they have will probably be real good talent. So, nothing to worry about there. I have them going 11-1, like I said, losing to Auburn at the end of the year, and I still, have them slated. I have them playing in the SEC championship game against Florida, winning like they usually do against Florida, and the championship game, and then going on to the playoff as like the 3 or the 4, maybe even the 2 in the playoff. But yeah, I still see them making the playoff, even though losing that game late in the season.